Hi, so I decided to make a part 2 rather than redoing the first video. So there's some things I forgot to mention. So when we look at 1 Peter 5:13, she who is in Babylon. Now look at the Greek. It can be the church. It can refer to a single person. I'm more inclined to think that it was referring to his wife. Okay, and so does my son Mark. Now Mark was the Peter's carrier, if you will. So Mark would have taken this letter and sent it, and have him ride on his horse, whatever, and deliver this letter. So Babylon here, the question is it Babylon Iraq, is it Babylon Egypt, and it's even put forth Babylon. It's code for Rome. When it gets to the point where somebody says it's code for something else, you really gotta question it, all right? And that has been widely accepted by a lot of people. But I believe he's talking about Babylon, Egypt. Keep in mind, this letter was sent to the 5 churches in Asia Minor. John wrote the book of Revelation, referred to Apocalypse at the time, wrote to the 7 churches in the same area. They would have compared notes. So you had half the equation where he was, Babylon, right here. And this is not, he's not using apocalyptic literature here. This is not code for anything, been said by a full president that represents Jerusalem. I don't think that's what's going on. It's literally Babylon. But we have to ask out which one is it, Iraq or Egypt. So that's where the book of Revelation comes in handy, and it would remind the readers of Egypt, second Exodus being Egypt. So that's how they knew where they had to go for their gathering. It would compare notes. Now, why would they do that? Because they could not afford to risk their gathering, bringing in the Gentiles with them. All that persecution. They had to leave quietly and leave them behind. Same thing with the Jews who denied Christ in the flesh. They could not bring them with them. It's either only the house of Israel who came to Christ who left for their gathering. And which I believe mentioned the end of Petra. So this is obviously the stick of Joseph. Okay, this is not the stick of Judah. These were the churches scattered throughout Asia Minor. That would have been the stick of Joseph. And so they were the ones that would have read this and taken heed and so forth. So what does this mean in the map? So so here Babylon, right here, Egypt. And when we look at the topography here, let's see here. Well, anyway, some reason the waterways are not showing up. There we go. I think that's the waterways. But anyway, there are several waterways that channeled down to Babylon, okay, where Peter would have been. And keep in mind, Peter was... If we look at John chapter 21, he was given the responsibility to feed his sheep. This is right after he pulled in that, like, I don't know how many fish it was. I can't remember what it was, but it's in there in John 21. And so he's given the responsibility to feed his sheep. So he would have had his family here and gone back and forth to Israel and Egypt to feed them. And then when they left for a gathering, the stick of Joseph, this is not the stick of Joseph here, this has been the stick of Judah. The stick of Joseph, they would have met him, and he would have escorted them to Petra. All right? And so when we look at Revelation 12, and the serpent cast out of his mouth water of the flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth, and swallowed the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. So there needs to be evidence of that. So when we go to Google Earth, we see evidence of that right here. All right. Now, if you want to believe it, Pella. Okay, let's Pella. There's no evidence of that. All right, and this is the widely accepted view among scholars. They think it's Pella where they gathered, and it doesn't make any sense. It would have been difficult for Peter to feed them, and they would have been in the path of Vespasian. Those who were fleeing during the 1335-day period. What am I talking about there? 1335 days. Let's go here. I'll show you that timeline. So, as I mentioned, part 1, the 1335 days here. So, they were fleeing, and but blessed is he who waiteth and come to the 1335 days. So, we had those who fled early, prematurely. They were not obedient to Christ already in. And then you had those who were obedient to Christ already in. That was the stick of Judah. All right. And so Peter would have been feeding them. Now, I believe what happened, of course, we have to rely heavily on Scripture, use common sense, critical thinking skills. The stick of Joseph had arrived in Petra. Peter had escorted them, and Peter would have passed away not long after that. And so they would have had all their boats, all right? They would have been able to feed themselves. And no likelihood God, if you learn from the book of Jonah, would probably provide them plants and fed them that way. And then just like the book of Jonah, the plants would have perished, and then they were raptured up. So leaving no trace behind that they were ever there. So, so Peter would have passed away sometime around here in the timeline, and they would have their boats. And then the flood would have came after the time and half a time, just like it said in Revelation 12. Nourished for a time and half a time already, which is what's going on here. Time and half a time. Time and half a time. All right. And so you might be wondering, why am I going backwards from here and then forwards? From this line. This line is the 40th anniversary of Christ's Passover. So it's centered around that. And so it worked out perfectly going backwards and then going forwards from there. So it's centered around there. And it's just like the wings of an eagle. It's symmetrical. Okay. So anyway, there's a lot of parts and pieces that tie it all together. And so, so it's kind of like geometry. You start with the given, basically Josephus writing, and I just kept working from there. And as you view the scripture, the puzzle pieces that I had to work with, okay, and piece it together, no scholar had done that, okay. I had checked around if any other scholar had the date for the 1325-day prophecy. Not a one. Ed Stevens didn't even have it. I still have the email. He didn't even have it. So, so this is the first timeline in history that is to scale of the Book of Revelation with the actual dates. So anyway, continuing on. So when you look again, look at Google Earth, there's no evidence of that, okay? But you see the evidence in Petra. And everything heavily suggests Petra. Alrighty. So, anyway. So, by Emperor Constantine destroying the history of this, what went on here, and having Eusebius write, oh yeah, Pella is where they went, which makes no logistical sense. Okay, it's been a nightmare for Peter that was the case. By making that up, and then claiming that Peter just went off to Rome, all right, abandoned his role feeding the sheep, that he was there and died, it allowed him to rewrite history and make it look like everything centered around Rome, the church centered around Rome, around Emperor Constantine, which is what he wanted. So, anyway, that's what I wanted to point out, which I missed in the first video. Alrighty, well, thank you very much for watching, and I'd love to hear your comments below, and you have an awesome day.